How's it going, everybody? This is Dailies to Downloads. My name is Chad. With me is Eric. And this week, we are going to be talking about Martin Scorsese, specifically the comedy movies that he's done. And one of the things that's great about his movies in general is that he incorporates a lot of genres into one movie. Even if it's a movie about a specific person, you'll have drama, you'll have action, you'll have comedy, but we are going to be talking first about the movies that we would classify predominantly as comedies. And by all means, if you think other movies that he's done that we don't necessarily put into that list are comedies, feel free to let us know. But we are going to start off by just briefly talking about the movies that would be classified more as comedies than they are anything else. And his first foray into comedy would have been The King of Comedy in 1982, written by Paul D. Zimmerman. That follows Rupert Pupkin, a passionate and yet unsuccessful comic who craves nothing more than to be in the spotlight. And to achieve this, he stalks and kidnaps his idol to take the spotlight for himself. It stars Robert De Niro, Jerry Lewis, Diane Abbott, Sandra Bernhardt, among others. Eric, what do you think about The King of Comedy? Did you like that one?
I do, yeah, and I feel like it's recently kind of come back in vogue in a way, thanks to like Joker,
Joker, yeah,
right? Where I feel like that was, what's his name? Todd Phillips, the director of Joker, where I feel like he couldn't get through an interview either by choice or because it was put upon him without having to acknowledge King of Comedy.
right.
As and De Niro's in Joker as well, so there were a bunch of connections. And yeah, I mean, the first time I saw the King of Comedy, what I think is interesting, and I'm trying to think back to like when it originally premiered. Like apparently it was at Cannes in 1983, and the French really like Jerry Lewis in a way that I never really, I don't. I don't know. In a way, I never really the Nutty Professor. All that stuff is like lost on me. I don't get it. Don Rickles is another one. I just don't. Even though he's great in Casino, Don Rickles, but I just don't get that kind of humor. But yeah, I mean, I think it's when we were discussing off air about what is a Scorsese comedy and what isn't. I feel like the King comedy is almost like a lighter version of there are certain Taxi Driver elements to it.
Yeah.
In terms of the social outcast and being very alone. Doesn't he live with his Rupert Pumpkin lives with his mom, right? Like in the basement, whatever. And there are certain scenarios where he's doing his stand up that is funny, but it also comes from like an awkward kind of funny, right? Like the uncomfortable id that is not necessarily playing for laughs, but comes about because it's so absurd, I guess.
Yeah, uncomfortable laughs, dark humor, a lot of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And it must have been strange to see Jerry Lewis in this, playing a pretty straight, serious role for the most part, against, I guess, you cast Jerry Lewis in a movie called The King Comedy, and then it's like a completely not what you would expect
right from him at all.
Yeah. So I like the movie a lot. It does seem to be getting its due after it hadn't for many years, it seems like.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I liked it. I've only seen the movie one time, and I own it, and I need to watch it again, because it is worth more viewings. A lot of times when I put in a Scorsese movie, it will be one of his more popular ones, but it is very good. Very good performances in it, and Jerry Lewis obviously is very good in a performance that you probably wouldn't expect from him. But yeah, that one's definitely worth another look. He being Scorsese would do another comedy. This probably the most all in all comedy that he's ever done, which is After Hours in 1985. And this was written by Joseph Minion, and it follows an ordinary word processor who has a really bad night in his life after he agrees to visit a girl in Soho who he met that evening at a coffee shop. It stars Griffin Dunn, Rosanna Arquette, Linda Fiorentino, Terry Garr, John Hurd, Catherine O'Hara is in it, Cheech and Chong, everybody.
Yeah, man.
And so I'll just say with this one, I think that this is one of Scorsese's most underrated movies. It's also, not that I did the research on this, although I should have, I would imagine it's probably his shortest movie.
Yeah.
It's clocks in at about an hour and a half, I think 93 minutes to be exact. And it's really, really good. It reminds me a lot of almost like a Coen Brothers comedy in many ways, in the way it unfolds. And I've seen this movie a couple times. I thought it was really good, and Griffin Dunn is very funny in it. And, you know, with the King of Comedy and After Hours, you really see how Scorsese can incorporate any tone he wants, any genre he wants into a movie, and, you know, become one of the masters that he is today. But what did you think of After Hours?
Yeah, and I guess that's a good point about the length. I guess you would have to go back to maybe like Who's That Knocking at My Door might also
Right.
be like the 90 minutes, but that's his first feature. Like, you know, like outside of that, yeah, and that was one. If I remember the kind of background correctly, like he was like he went to that stage of like being like for hire. These weren't passion projects of his. I believe that screenwriter was like a Columbia grad student or something like that. You know, and he went on this kind of where he, After Hours, Color of Money.
Right. It was a
All the,
weird part of his career.
yeah, where it was
I think
like,
he was also dealing with a lot of substance issues at that time.
yeah, and he was not probably the King of Comedy not being a commercial success. I think made things a lot harder. But I think After Hours is interesting too, and is so easily watchable because it also feels like it's probably the most the most film of his with like the lowest stakes in a sense. Not that
Right. True.
not that it feels that way when you're watching it, because it still feels like the end of the world in a lot of ways for this guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, like as you describe it, like he meets a girl at a coffee shop and things transpire, and he just really wants to get back home. He's so tired. He has work in the morning, and that's really, those are the stakes. Things happen as a result of that, but normally there's some element of death in the filmography of each of his movies. After Hours doesn't come from this plot, but is still extremely tight in the ways that you would still you wouldn't mistake this for someone else's movie. So all of his elements are still very much there.
Right.
It feels like the loosest, I guess, right? And it is like, just by mentioning that cast, it's like our main character meets this quirky character for 10 minutes, and then he'll meet this quirky character. But it kind of just takes that kind of episodic structure for the whole 90 minutes.
And he works with a lot of people in that movie that I don't know that he's worked with a lot before or after that.
I don't think
you might know that more than I do, but I certainly don't remember. Like, I mean, people like John Hurd and Catherine O'Hara and certain Cheech and Chong, like
Terry Garr,
right?
He did work again with Rosanna Arquette on the New York Stories short,
right?
Life Lessons, and she's very, we can say she dies very quickly in the movie, but even that, like, the movie is fascinating in just that, like, she's also a burn victim. She has scars. Like, there are all these interesting, I don't even know if they're asides, but these interesting darker elements to the subtext that is very interesting as well. It's also great to look at a New York that is very different than it is now.
Yeah, I always find that fascinating too. Yeah. So then after that, he really didn't go into focus on comedy totally again until 2013, which gave us The Wolf of Wall Street. That was written by Terrence Winter, based on the book by Jordan Belfort, and it follows the story of Jordan Belfort from his rise as a wealthy stockbroker, living a high life, to a person who is involved in crime, corruption, and dealing with the federal government. It stars, it's an all-star cast. That might be a cliche term, but it has Leonardo DiCaprio, Jonah Hill, Margot Robbie, Matthew McConaughey, Kyle Chandler, Rob Reiner, John Bernthal, and many, many more. And this is probably, you would first describe it as more of a biopic, but
Yeah.
I would say that the aim is very much for comedy in what's going on, specifically because you're dealing with an unreliable narrator. And as a result, a lot of things are funny throughout the whole movie. But I really like The Wolf of Wall Street. I've watched it many times, and we'll talk more about some specific scenes as we go along towards the end here. But I mean, it's a long movie, and a lot of people complained about that. Never bothered me, not for 1 minute, because I think that it's really entertaining from start to finish. It maybe not have been the first thing Margot Robbie did, but it certainly introduced the world into how talented she is, and obviously gorgeous. And it has a lot of really memorable moments in it. I don't know that you and I have ever talked about your opinion of The Wolf of Wall Street, but what did you think of it?
Yeah, I feel like, I mean, we've definitely texted about it. I think when it came out, I think we texted about it.
Yeah.
Like, where we definitely talked about Benihana. I know that. Because
Yeah.
I don't. My familiarity with Benihana it's still pretty low. I think I went to one once or something. But
I grew up with Benihanas in my area, but
yeah.
being a picky eater, I never went to one.
It
And
just doesn't seem. I don't know. I mean,
even now, like, I've been to, hibachi steakhouses and places where they come out and they cook as you sit around the table, but I don't know that I've ever been to an actual Benihana.
yeah. I mean, and especially in a post-COVID world, there will be no more.
It's funny. Well, no, it's not funny, but it's interesting that you mentioned that, because their whole setup is not complement the world right now, or probably after it goes away, it'll probably be a while till people become more comfortable doing something like that again.
Absolutely, yeah. But sorry, that was just a
What a weird tangent on
side
Benihana.
tangent.
That's
But it is, for some reason, the first thing that comes to my mind, that and Steve Madden, I guess, are the two things. But yeah, for me, I have only seen this twice. I saw it the week it came out, the Christmas 2013, and then I watched it again maybe a year or two later, and I like it. I don't love it in the sense that I actually get kind of, I don't want to say bored, but tired with it. And that's not necessarily because of the length, but because I think it is very it doesn't slow down too much. And I think the best moments are when it does slow down, like on the Kyle Chandler chat with Leonardo DiCaprio,
right.
where there are roles being played and then the roles are reversed, and those kind of, I think the moments where it gets serious is actually where it stands out a little bit more to me. The comedy elements feel like a little bit more of the braggadocio, kind of like, we're men, we're guys, we do guy stuff, we talk like what you'd expect sailors to talk, in a sense that Scorsese really leans into that, I guess.
Right.
That might be also like Terrence Winter, but I don't know too much about Terrence Winter. I haven't seen Boardwalk Empire. I doubt the dialogue is similar, but of that kind of people, and I think that's also something we'll talk about, is that a lot of his films also are about the dopey milieu of a lot of these guys, and this one especially is about bigger dumbasses than usual, perhaps.
Right.
More
like Terrence Winter, what you were saying, like Terrence Winter started out writing for The Sopranos,
right,
and then obviously went on to create Boardwalk Empire, and he has a lot of familiarity with crime related stories and characters, and his strength is in making those characters and that world seem interesting and engaging to the viewer, which obviously, and maybe, some people would say glorifies. I don't know that I'd go that far, but that's really on hand in The Wolf of Wall Street. Certainly. I mean, he a lot of people say that they were glorifying this behavior, which I said then, and I will say now, to me, those people weren't watching the movie closely enough. But but yes, Terrence Winter he has a lot of experience with anything crime related.
Yeah, I do remember that being the main talking point, or I don't even want to say controversy, where the glorification, right? Or if it is glorifying, blah, 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 blah. Which, like usual, those things kind of die out after a
Right.
few weeks, but yeah, for me, I mean, I like it more as DiCaprio's like performance, obviously.
Yeah.
But it's maybe one where I appreciate more individual scenes than the entirety of the whole. Like, I think like you have a classic scene with him when he's trying to get into his car and he's drugged out of his mind, and there are these
The Quaaludes scene is
physical comedy,
unbelievable.
yeah, like those kind of moments. But for me, there's also a lot of I don't know. It's some of it feels like aimless raunch at times, where it takes a while to. It may just be that I don't think Jordan Belfort's that fascinating. I definitely don't think he's that fascinating as a real person. And you're getting an exaggerated kind of frat boy bro culture.
Right, like that's what makes it interesting, is that he might not be interesting, but he thinks he is.
Yeah. And there's still enough of the Scorsese filmography with its still very much a New York, Queens, Long Island-y kind of, the Duchess of Bay Ridge or whatever, the big hair on the women.
Yeah.
It's still doing those tropes, if you will, and it's mostly set in the 80s, so, all that combined. But I don't know, for me, it still feels a little bit more minor, despite it's almost 3 hours, right? Like, despite the epic length.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's still, but it is one that is definitely a comedy. I feel like it would be hard. Obviously, the actual real ramifications of this guy's crimes
are serious.
And it is not totally glossed over. I mean, obviously, you're getting it from the point of view of the guy doing the crimes, so
right.
You get the unreliable narrator aspect of it. But there's they talk about a coworker who slits his wrists in a bathtub. Like, there are these dark moments that stick out because of how they're trying to be rushed over because he doesn't want to acknowledge that much. The Jordan Belfort in the movie. But I mean, it is definitely comedy, for the most part.
So before we get into all the other comic scenes of Scorsese's canon, if you were ranking these three movies, Erik, what would you put? How would you rank them?
I'll say After Hours, King of Comedy, Wolf of Wall Street.
Interesting.
It's just like the King of Comedy I like a lot as well, but After Hours, I think in the past we've talked about watchability and revisiting things and things like that. Like, After Hours, I feel like any mood, I could be in any mood and put it on, right?
Yeah.
King Comedy, you have to be in a different kind of mindset, or
I agree. And that's why, I agree. That's why if I was making a list, they would be different. It would be the Wolf of Wall Street, After Hours, and then the King of Comedy. And it's tough to rank them because I like all three movies a lot. So I mean, you rank them, but they're all terrific and worth revisiting.
You could watch After Hours. You could fit 2 After Hours in The Wolf of Wall Street.
That's true.
I mean, economically, it's very.
The Wolf of Wall Street will motivate you to want to learn more about stocks.
Combined with what was the Inside Job 2 years earlier, the documentary?
Oh yeah. So obviously, those three movies, if agree, and anybody who's watching this agrees that those are the three predominantly comedies, obviously it's not the only comedy that he has done as a director throughout his career. There are countless funny moments in other movies that are more crime thrillers or dramas. And so we're going to talk a little bit about some of those. We'll just get the ball rolling here with a couple of them. And I would say in The Departed, there's a lot of funny moments in The Departed, which is obviously the movie that won him Best Director and won Best Picture. And the moments in that movie that stand out to me the most, any scene with Officer Dignam, played by Mark Wahlberg, I would say is very funny. So that's one that comes to my head immediately. And so, Erik, in terms of the whole career, what comic moments come to you right away?
Well, for me, like when we were talking about even like what we consider to be his comedies, like I feel like there's an argument to be made about like some like Goodfellas being like, yes, obviously there are serious moments and there are serious results as to what happens to these characters and stuff. But like, if as a viewer watching Goodfellas, like if you've seen it with an audience in a theater or whatever, like people are having a good time, right? Like there's a lot of vocal laughter. There's a lot. So for me, when I think of Goodfellas, I have this kind of cheery kind of feeling about it because
Right.
there is so much funniness that comes from it, and not just because I think he also walks a very like um, there's a clear line almost between like mocking characters and laughing with them in a sense. Like Goodfellas, because I think there is a sense of them being a little, I don't know, little not Rhodes scholars, I guess, but
Right.
you know, but at the same time, you're also very much care about them, right, as well. So some of the comedy also comes from just their day to dayness, but and that's also and it also comes in very awkward ways. So you wouldn't say that like I don't know, like do I amuse you funny how the Joe Pesci thing as being straight up comedy, but there are elements of that in that as well. Um, so for a Goodfellas moment, I mean, I feel like there's a lot of the when they come to Scorsese's mom's house, right? Which right after they kill the Frank Vincent character,
Right.
they have blood all over them, and they have the knife and everything, and the mom just wants to give them dinner and just treat
Right.
them like her son's buddies. And that to me, that kind of thing is very very funny, and it's funny because it has the element of like darkness under it, right?
Right.
And so you have to see these wise guys play cool and collective, which they really can't because they're just not subtle by nature. And so that's where a lot of that humor comes from.
And would you agree? Would you think that if we're talking about like best comic scenes in his movies, would you put the Joe Pesci scene where do you think do I look
Do I
funny to
use
you?
you?
Would you put that at near the top, or is there a scene in a different movie that you would say is better than that?
As an isolated scene, I'd put that probably at the top. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Just and yeah, any kind of yeah, and in ways that I think it's also interesting about his films with the comedy is that it's it's very situational in a lot of ways. Like after they do the Lufthansa heist and they all come in with the fancy new clothes and they're all showing off that they've obviously robbed them and they're using all the money that they're not supposed to be using, and that ends up with them all in the meat trucks essentially. Like there is something funny to that as well, right? In the sense that they are leading to their own demise. And another one I want to mention too, just like as a very very funny movie too, is like The Irishman from last year, where 90% I feel like of Pacino's performance and a lot of De Niro's narration is really really funny.
Yeah, there's one
Uh,
part where he goes on a rant that was mentioned on one of the lists that I looked at.
was it? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like the tone of that movie is funny up until like maybe the last 20 minutes, 25
Yeah.
minutes for the most part. And that's why the ending works well as well because it's such a tonal shift, right? But yeah, I think Joe Pesci, even Joe Pesci in Raging Bull, which is not necessarily what you would classify as a comedy in any sense, but because they're
The
so.
steak scene was mentioned in a lot of articles that I looked at.
Oh really?
Yeah, the scene where De Niro's character is complaining about the steak.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's just like there's a sense in Raging Bull because they just like they can't help themselves. Like
Right.
they're not they're not smart enough to get it, and yet you can see how they could make the right choices, but they don't because they're just too bullheaded to pun the movie, I guess.
Yeah.
Too bullheaded and Raging Bull to do it. But just those kind of quips that they have that feel improvisational, even if maybe they're not. Like did you fuck my wife thing? Like it just feels improv-y. Also stands out to me, even though you wouldn't say Raging Bull is like comedy.
Right. So there's other scenes in other movies. There's the scene with Joe Pesci and the bank manager in Casino,
Yeah.
which is a funny one. There's the boob censorship scene in The Aviator. Now, The Aviator doesn't have a lot of comedy in it, but I do remember that scene. Now, it's been a while since I've watched The Aviator from start to finish.
I forget about that one sometimes. I mean, I liked it, but it's
I mean, yeah, like I said, it's good. There's the first date scene in sequence in Taxi Driver that was listed a lot.
Well, what about the tiger in Mean Streets? The bar owner.
Oh, like the mooks.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Mean Streets is a pretty low stakes movie. And by the time the tiger shows up in that cage, that the bar owner, like there's a lot of funny stuff in that in Mean Streets too.
Absolutely. So for me, if I was listing one of my favorite scenes comedy wise, I would have to mention Goodfellas. It's tough to top that scene with Pesci. Like it really is. I would say some of the funniest scenes are any scenes with him in it. But a close second for me would be the Quaaludes scene, because that is just a surreal sequence from start to finish when you watch it. But
would you say that Joe Pesci would be your MVP for like the comedic performance in a Scorsese movie?
Absolutely, I think that's fair.
Yeah, but I think Jack Nicholson also has a good showing in Departed as being a funny guy. You know which one we haven't mentioned because I don't remember much of it, even though I liked it? Hugo.
Yeah. And I'm trying to remember. Like that's another one I've only
geared more toward children, obviously. But
I've only seen it once. It was very good. I liked it a lot. I don't remember any super funny scenes in it. It was a family movie, certainly. It was entertaining, but
like Sacha Baron Cohen is like he's like a guard or something, right?
Yeah.
And so there's like these hijinks, these chase sequences and stuff. It's very lighthearted. I mean, and then I guess just like maybe for the wrong reasons, but like the ending of Cape Fear, like when he's like on the boat and they're having like just two lawyers battling it out, blah blah blah, and he goes into like this whole Freddy Krueger like spiel.
Right.
Which a lot of people hate because it doesn't feel like part of the rest of the movie. But that's also a more Looney Tunes-esque moment in a Scorsese film.
No, very true.
I think of the opposite. Like, what is the most serious one? Silence? The Age of Innocence?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would have to say, and having seen both of the movies you just mentioned, and most of Scorsese's
pretty
canon, to me, it's tough to not say Silence. Like it really is. Like The Age of Innocence, I can't remember any comedy scenes in it off the top of my head. I bet you there's some lighthearted moments though.
Yeah.
I cannot think of one in Silence.
This is probably the most dead serious of all.
It's a very, very serious movie.
Yeah.
And certainly more for the Scorsese hardcore fans like you and I.
I mean, sometimes I have to remember that actually like came out because it opened and closed and I don't know, it didn't hit. It
was another one of those passion projects of his that he had been wanting to get off the ground for a long time, and I liked it. I thought it had some really good performances in it. It's an interesting story. It's tough to really sink your teeth into it. I had it digitally for a long time before I watched it, because I was so used to watching movies of his in the theater, and I didn't get a chance to see that one in theaters. And so when it came out digitally, I got it right away. But then it took me a while to actually sit down and watch it, because it's a long movie as well,
Yeah.
as most of his movies are. And that never bothers me. But yeah, I liked it a lot. I thought it was really good, but it's very serious. You have to, something definitely have to be in the mood for.
Yeah. Same Shutter Island. There's no real. Are there any laughs in Shutter Island? Probably not. I mean, it would be very.
I mean, maybe if you're laughing at Scorsese or not at DiCaprio's performance,
Yeah, yeah.
and the craziness aspects of it. But
Yeah.
but yeah, so if nothing else, we discussed how versatile Scorsese is in his movies, and he only really has those 3 movies that are predominantly comedies. I would love for him to do more, but obviously he's not getting any younger.
And also, we can't forget his great performance in the comedy Shark Tale.
Oh God, yeah. How could we forget?
He can do comedy himself when he wants to. But,
absolutely.
American Express commercials and stuff like that.
And his, and as you mentioned, the scene with the mom. His mom is always was in a lot of his movies, and was usually very funny.
What was the doc about his parents? The Italian American.
My Voyage to Italy.
No, just the one. Where
the one that's just called Italian American.
Like cooking dinner in the living room. That's the whole documentary. Like that. They're just funny people. They're just really lighthearted, funny people.
Well, if you have any other thoughts about Martin Scorsese's comedies, please let us know. Next week we will get into a 5-hour discussion on Silence and more serious. No. One of these days we'll probably cover other parts of his career, but. It'll be interesting to see the types of the movies that he brings out after this. I forget. I always used to look on IMDb as to what was coming
the Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
that's gonna be. It was supposed to. The pandemic kind of pushed it back. Now they're gonna start in like March, I think.
Yeah.
For Apple TV Plus.
Right.
I don't know. They're giving like $200 million, so you might as well take it. Might as well take it. Will I be able to watch it? I don't have an Apple TV Plus account, but we'll see. Somehow, some way.
The way of the world, streaming rights are becoming more important than ticket sales. Anyway, that's another episode. But thank you for joining us, and we will see you next week.